So good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
It's a little warmer than the last time we spoke. We were in Davos the last time. So, we've been talking all day about the power of AI, and I think you're a big believer in the power of AI. But your company focuses on something that we don't hear as much about anymore, and I don't know that it's gotten any less important. We're just talking about it less, which is trust. Talk about the role that trust and governance play, especially in the corporate world.
Absolutely. I think we all here are big believers in AI, and we spoke about the signaling that AI is winning is when we get the market share. The thing is, there's a lot to unpack beneath it. We won't get the market share if we can't trust this technology, if consumers can't adopt it, if enterprises can't scale AI at speed and scale within their organizations. So at Credo AI, what we are focused on is what is trust and how do you operationalize it? Because words are easy. How do you actually put this in practice becomes really complicated.
So how you do it.
Exactly. So I think there's a very scientific method that we've been deploying for the past 5 years, which is really focused on an ARC technology. A is for alignment. What do you actually need to measure? And it's really conditional on different use cases. And I think that's where the contextual understanding of AI applications becomes really critical. And then once you understand what you need to measure, how do you actually go and measure it becomes really critical. And we spend a lot of time thinking about the risks so that everyone can actually adopt this with trust. And then lastly is compliance, but not just to regulations, company policies, standards, which obviously are emerging pretty quickly right now.
And who are your customers and what are they asking for? Where are they? I assume they all care about their reputation. They want to deploy this, but they want to know that it's not going to kill their brand. Who are your customers and what are they asking you for?
Yeah, so currently Credo AI serves global 2000s. We serve financial services, healthcare, pharma, a lot of agencies. And what they really care about right now is adopting AI fast, but with eyes wide open. And a big part of that is how do I measure that trust, right? So for maybe a CPG and retail brand, they deeply care about reputational harms. So within that, what are the scientific measures? Bias becomes one, toxicity becomes other, adversarial attacks, etc. Whereas if you are, let's say, a financial services company, you might deeply care about what regulatory oversight you have. So are you meeting the requirements of things like model risk management? So I would say there's a lot of ways to define trust, and that's why it becomes really critical. It's not just about adopting AI, but it's how you adopt AI, and do you actually understand this technology well enough?
So I want to broaden out in a second, but looking at Credo specifically, I'm curious, you're not a tiny company, but this is a world of tech giants where most of the oxygen gets consumed either by the OpenAI and Anthropics of the world or by the Microsofts and Googles. What is it like out there when Meta's making these giant offers, when Microsoft and Google can bundle it with other products? What is it like to be a smaller company in the AI space?
I think a smaller company in this AI space, tackling trust, bringing governance to market, very difficult. But I don't think I would do a startup if it was an easy problem to solve. Having said that, just to maybe unpack that a little bit, I think the challenges come right now. There's a huge focus on investing in AI innovation, but we don't see a correlated investment in safety and governance. The second challenge is I think governance many a times is sort of correlated with regulation. And I think that's really problematic because it's not. It's all about alignment. It's about risk understanding, measurements, evaluations, and regulation is a tiny component of that. And I think the third thing is we actually lack AI literacy. Everyone wants to adopt AI at speed and scale, but guess what? Our workforces are not ready for it. They don't understand what to measure because they're not using AI as much.
And I want to talk about sort of the broader conversation, actually, that I feel like we are having less of than we were a year ago, around how do we make these systems safe? How do we mitigate bias? How do we deal with the potential for income inequality? Does it bother you? Like, to me, I didn't think we were moving fast enough on those discussions a year or two ago. Now it feels like we've stopped talking about them, or at least the discussion has gotten pushed to the sidelines. I felt like no clear indication of that was the Paris AI Summit. So we had Bletchley Park and Seoul, where they were really digging into some of these really thorny problems. Then you get to Paris, and it was like a trade show. All the companies were just trying to land European deals. Do we need to have that conversation, and how do we restart it? How do we get it back on center stage?
That's such a great question. I think we are seeing two sides of that. One is, yes, publicly, maybe there's not enough conversation, but we are also seeing this really flip side in enterprises who are under a lot of pressure to adopt a lot of AI very quickly. But guess what? They've learned from the past that they can't do that without understanding and without trust. So even though there might not be a public discourse as much as we would like, we are seeing actually acceleration on trying to figure out. Again,
because the businesses themselves want it.
Exactly, because the businesses want to make sure that they are going in with eyes wide open, and governance becomes pivotal to making that trust happen.
And how far do you think that takes us? Because it feels like in the past, tech companies regulating themselves has been maybe necessary but not sufficient seems a stretch. Necessary only sort of happening and not sufficient. Is businesses' risk of harming their own reputation enough to make the majority of companies do the right thing?
No, absolutely not. And I think this is where the AI action plan is a good step, but it's like just the beginning, right? So how do you unpack when you say evaluation and standards framework? What does that mean for a business? When you talk about measurements and making sure open source ecosystem is safe, what does that mean? So there's a lot of unpacking that needs to happen, and unfortunately, I don't see much action there, but more work needs to happen.
And one thing that gets held up as sort of in opposition to trust and safety, and I know this isn't the position you hold, is we got to beat China. So therefore, they're not going to worry about it. We can't worry about it. We have to move full speed ahead. Does trust and safety have to be at the expense of competing with China?
Absolutely not. I think it goes hand in hand, and we need to beat China. I think the key thing is, but we also need to trust the systems that we are putting out in the market. And so if there's a conversation about the best of breed AI innovations, and we are not talking about governance, we are not talking about trust, I think we should really count ourselves out then.
And where are the signs of encouragement? What gives you optimism around the trust and safety, besides the fact that some of your customers obviously are taking it seriously enough to buy your services?
First and foremost, I think my team. We have a very mission-aligned team that deeply cares about this topic, but it's only 50 of us, so need more. But I think the second is the AI action plan. I think that was a really good step. It's not the complete step. It's a really good step in thinking about the entire AI supply chain and where the trust breakdown might happen. And I think we are very heartened, and something we have actively supported is a strong evaluation and standards ecosystem, really thinking about open source and risk within that, et cetera. And I think the third thing is we need more action. I think we need to see more investments in startups like ours. It's less than 1% right now, or even maybe 0.1%. So I think we need to see more investments, not only in startups, but also in big enterprises, in governance and safety and risk assessment.
And do we have the standards we need to measure trust and risk? It seems to me like, again, I don't doubt that many of your customers are taking it seriously, at least to the degree they don't want to harm their reputation. But is there enough today to know, or is it still a big unknown when you deploy AI? Can you do it with relative security ahead of time, that you are doing it in a trustworthy way, or is that something that can only be measured after the fact?
So I think we are in this messy middle right now. I think most of the organizations we work with, they know what does good look like for them, but they don't know whether what good looks like for them works for the broader ecosystem. So they have their own set of guardrails and policies, and to your point, can we hold them accountable to that? That's a tough problem. But the second thing is we are seeing early signs of emergence in standards ecosystem through ISO, NIST, and others. But I think more work needs to happen. We are not keeping pace with AI innovation. And I believe for AI innovation to be successful, for us to continue winning this race in AI and building that market share, we need to absolutely build on trust.
And that's, we've talked a lot about the corporate side, what companies are doing out of their own interests. But obviously, companies' interests aren't necessarily the same as the public's. I'm curious your thoughts on how do we have more of a conversation around what data isn't there. Quick story, I was at this amazing exhibit at the San Francisco Exploratorium on AI, and it was really nuanced. It really dug into the hard problems. And one of the things I loved, they had these physical file cabinets with folders for all the different types of data that just aren't in any written down system, so therefore they're not in an LLM. We know these systems are biased. We know they reflect the voices that are dominant on the internet. How do we fill in those gaps? Because my sense is the AI models aren't going anywhere. The only opportunity is to make them better.
Yeah, hard problem, Mina, again. And
I solved all the hard problems.
Exactly. I think we are seeing three levels of work that is happening and not happening. So one is obviously we need to make sure that the systems within the companies that are building it needs to have multi-stakeholder perspective. And how much we are talking about AI, automating and humans not needed, actually humans are needed. We are seeing data sets missing, not representing Global South as an example. So how do you actually make that happen? I think the second thing is really around what matters to the business and transparently sharing that. We've been talking a lot about transparency. What does that mean, right? So I think we need a little bit more clarity, not just from the frontier model providers, but also the application developers in terms of what data sets have they used to build these systems. And that is something we've been actively advocating for.
Well, we're in DC. It feels like I would be remiss if I only asked you the hard questions. So what would you like to see? Very little has gotten passed on AI from this Congress. Senator Cruz talked about a couple of the things that have passed around deepfakes and around one's own likeness, which are very narrow slices of this. But there hasn't been a comprehensive bill. If you could have comprehensive AI regulation, what are some of the components? What would you recommend to the folks in the audience?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The three things that we believe need to happen, and I think it's a good starting point. One is, I think, really thinking about the evaluations and what measurements need to happen, because it is so use case specific. You cannot have a peanut butter approach to measuring everything in AI to make sure it is safe. So context specific measurements, I think, absolutely critical, and that is something we are actively working on. The second is big believer in disclosure reporting. Doesn't have to be public, but it has to be between the companies that are either selling their AI models or companies that are building applications. I absolutely believe that disclosure reporting, how you've built these systems, robust system cards, what kind of testing practices have you used, absolutely critical. And you can sort of overlay that in a transparency report. And then the last thing that I would love to see is a little bit more investment and understanding of how much our company is actually investing in trust and safety. Right now, it's a black box. Even the enterprises we work with, we don't know how much are they actually willing compared to the AI innovation, how much are they spending on AI trust and safety, and I would love to see that.
Well, thank you so much, as always, Navrina. We're going to have to leave it there, but appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And hopefully the conversation will continue.
Absolutely.